Good God,
We've
man.
gone 16 minutes without once touching upon the ostensible topic of this evening, by the way. I wanted to point that
Well,
out.
I mean, and that's as is it should. By the
We'll
way,
just
one
cut this
little
part
more,
out in post. Yeah, there we go.
one little more side note.
Yeah.
Apparently, since one of my friends was listening to our most recent podcast, and they said my microphone sounded better. So apparently, this new pop screen is doing its fucking job.
Cool.
That's
Okay,
really the
cool
only
beans. Cool beans.
off-topic thing I've got for the moment.
For the moment, but we're supposed to be talking about the guy, man. Right?
Yeah. Please tell me you're not going to
He's
call
the guy.
the episode that
He's the guy, man, and that's what you call him.
you are.
Or
Neil
the guy,
Farzad, son of Jor-El.
El
Funny enough, I don't think he ever
Guyerino,
wrote
if
any
you're not
Superman.
into the whole
That is
brevity
neither
thing.
here nor there.
No, the title for the episode is Enter Sandman. Like, that's not even a question.
Right
Oh,
on.
that's sweet.
Enter Sandman.
Yeah, okay,
that's
so
happening.
Neil Gaiman.
Yep,
The
Neil
man,
Gaiman.
Neil Gaiman.
the myth, the legend.
You're gonna have
So,
to take the
for
wheel
those
here.
not in
I've
the
never
know-
read anything by Neil Gaiman.
So, for those not in the know, Neil Gaiman is a British comic book author whose claim to fame originally was writing a adult comic book series called Sandman, which was unique in its time for the fact that when he wrote it, it had a beginning, a middle, and an end.
What?
And he essentially
It was also like one of Vertigo's first comics.
and
Or
one
was
of
it
Vertigo. It may be
was it the first?
No, Swamp Thing was the first Vertigo comic.
Okay, all right.
And that was Alan Moore working on that, which then Neil Gaiman took over Swamp Thing for him, as
We've
he had
talked
done
about
with
Alan
many other
Moore
comics. In
before.
fact, we have. And in fact, to segue here, Neil Gaiman took over one of his first assignments outside of some work in 2000 AD, the British anthology comic, was to take over the writing of Miracle Man from
that's
Alan
right.
Moore. Now, Miracle Man, I don't think I've gone into. Have I gone into Miracle Man before on this? It's
No, I
worth
don't
going
think
into,
so.
and I can make it fairly brief. So, Miracle Man, if I can remember properly, is not the first name of this comic book. I cannot. It's very all right. So, Miracle Man started out when basically Britain had publishing rights to Shazam,
Oh, okay.
Captain Marvel.
Sure.
And then suddenly they lost the rights, but they still have the comic to produce. Now, and this may have been because DC sued Fawcett Comics because Shazam was too close to Superman, or Captain Marvel was too close to being like Superman. So then the comic got changed to Marvel Man over in Britain. And they changed it from being a magical character that said the word Shazam to a character that was science-based that said the word Katoma, which is atomic backwards.
Huh.
And there was Marvel Man, Kid Marvel Man, and I can't remember who the third Marvel Man was. And so this went on for a while. And then when it got published in the States, as to avoid the problem of Marvel getting upset because I think Eclipse Comics was publishing them, they changed it to Miracle Man.
Okay.
And Neil Gaiman was writing that at the time too, and he never finished his run though because the publisher went under. Though I hear Marvel Comics later bought the rights to it, republished it in a graphic novel format, and supposedly one day Neil Gaiman will complete the story.
Okay.
Marvel Man, Miracle Man, was one of the first comics known for being highly meta and being a commentary on deconstructing superhero comics. Even before, I think it predates, I could be wrong, I believe it predates The Dark Knight Returns or even Watchmen.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Let me double check that, but keep going.
As a matter of fact, I know it predates Watchmen because Alan Moore did that before working for DC when he was still over in Britain. So it would have had to predate Watchmen. It would have had to.
Dark Knight Returns is 1986. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if that means anything to you.
Yeah, no, it definitely predates that.
Okay.
And when Alan Moore took over this title, he started making it highly meta and deconstructive, and very basically, without going too much into the plot, because boys are allowed to cover that. That could be its own damn episode. And other people have done it better than me. Essentially, it takes place many years after the comic book, after a time skip, and the main character has forgotten that he turns into a superhero or that he ever was a superhero.
Interesting.
So basically, what you're telling me is that comic books in the 80s are doing the things that TV shows and comic book movies are doing now.
Yeah.
Basically,
In
yeah.
the
Okay.
80s, they were deconstructing the whole genre, or whatever you pronounce that shit. I don't care.
Okay.
I'm not French. So that's may not be where Neil Gaiman got his exact start, but it is one of the earlier works he's known for, outside of taking over for Alan Moore in Swamp Thing. And then from there, I don't know directly from there, but from there going on to Sandman, which soon will be a Netflix show.
Yep.
And I am looking forward to it because I've seen a clip from the first episode, and while it is not panel for panel for the comic book, it is very close and thematically appropriate. And I hope it gets treated better than American Gods was. Though to be fair, American Gods was a novel with a much shorter runtime than Sandman as a comic book had.
That's an interesting question. Will a comic book series translate to a TV series better than a novel series will?
It all depends.
Yeah.
It does. It does. In this case, I think so
I
because
think
first
it
off,
might be easier to do.
I think it's longer. First off,
Yeah.
and its end is already written by the author, so
If
there's
I-
no need to make up a.
Hey, what a wild idea.
Well, and Neil Gaiman's actually known for when he can, like he'll try to work with the writers of the series, or like he's done screenplays for
Yeah.
movies before, so like he knows how to write for the screen. So he's usually involved when he can be, which usually ends up the end
It ends
product.
up working very well. A good example of this, an earlier example of this, was Neverwhen, which I think started out as a radio drama. But then he wrote, I believe this is the order. Then he wrote the TV show
It was a miniseries.
and then he went on, I think, to write the novel. I could be wrong. And I remember I used to have that on freaking DVD. I have since lost it, which means I must now recover it.
If I'm recalling the chronology correctly, he wrote the drama, which they basically filmed on a soundstage for TV, and he was so unhappy with how it turned out. He then basically just wrote the novel. He didn't really like how it turned out, but he apparently learned a lot after that because most of the stuff that he's been involved with the exception of American Gods, has turned out pretty well.
Yeah, he wrote a.
They just tried to stretch American Gods too far. It was just
they did. He wrote a very good episode of Doctor Who called "The Doctor's Wife." I'm trying to describe what one might best term as the flavor of his works, because a Neil Gaiman work is identifiably something he wrote, which is not to say it's all the same or it all goes the same way, but the tonality of it. The turn of phrase, the cleverness is very. It's him. Know it's him.
Well, he uses literary devices, in places and he's, I do think that he's got a cohesive philosophy, sort of undergirding most of his stories. There's usually something that's, I wouldn't say it's like didactic, but I mean there's a logical consequence of what's happening, I think.
Now, sir, would you like for the studio audience to please explain that $20 word you just busted out?
Which one?
Didactic.
Didactic
no, that just means
in
that
the
it's
mode
like
of a teacher. Like it means you're making a point.
yeah, it's like it's not preachy. Like to say something's didactic, it's like, oh, there's a clear lesson here that's trying to be imbued, and I wouldn't.
Oh,
I
you mean
wouldn't.
kind of like Thundercats and He-Man was supposed to be didactic?
Yeah, exactly. So
Wait,
I wouldn't say
what?
that his work is like that, which I appreciate.
I
Thundercats was supposed to be didactic.
Oh, let him talk about that.
don't get me started.
Wait, what?
Because we do
I
not want we don't want to go because
I thought those things were all supposed to sell
Thunder.
toys. Wait,
There was
They
more
were.
to it. Okay,
there were
okay.
Thundercats
We are
toys.
going to put a pin in this because any discussion of Thundercats is going to lead me down the Transformers rabbit hole. And when I get going on the Transformers rabbit hole, it then leads to the great subject that I am known to rant about at length, nonstop, whether anyone wants me to or not.
All right. So
But
back
yes,
to Neil Gaiman.
back to Neil Gaiman. Thank
to
you
Neil
very
Gaiman.
much. He also wrote. He's written a number of wonderful things. One of the most recent things, and we're going to be going back and forth on his works here, that he wrote that I have the audiobook that he narrated. Lovely speaking voice, by the way. Was his book called Norse Gods, where he went
Yeah, that one.
and he goes and he basically just collects the tales of the Norse gods as best as can be reconstructed and translated, because we've lost a lot, because a lot of that was,
It's him
handed
basically
down.
doing the poetic Edda.
Yes. And it's beautifully spoken. And he did it for his son, Ash, and who he had with Amanda Palmer, and who's getting back together with her old partner in the Dresden Dolls to do another Dresden Dolls album. That's neither here nor there. But yeah, and I can have it both in. I gave my wife a copy of this for Valentine's Day many years ago, because she loves Neil Gaiman and Norse gods. And I got myself a copy of the audiobook to listen to, and it has lulled me to a happy sense of La La Land many a time, and I've listened to it all the way through Awake as well. And it's really amazing to listen to him read his own work, because you get exactly the sense of what he's doing with it.
Well, it actually reminds me of hearing audio of Tolkien reading like any of the Lotor stuff. Like you're okay, this is like you're nailing the cadence because you wrote it.
Wrote it, yeah.
So yeah,
you wrote it, and Neil Gaiman, he also did a very it's a story that he did in an anthology that was put out, I think called, and I may have the title wrong, Stories of the White Wolf, which was an Elric of Melbourne.
shit, that's right. He did do that.
Many authors, and his was called, I think his was called Childhood by Moorcock, which, oof. That's a title right there you don't want. But that's the title he went with. And it's very much him. It's very British. His writing is quintessentially fucking British. All right. Yep.
This is my introduction to Moorcock right here.
That's a good one, though.
Somebody did a recent book of this, and I saw it on Twitter, and I jumped on it because, like, this looks cool.
It's up to 4 books now.
Yeah, but because the print is really small, and I'm old. But
art's beautiful, though.
It looks gorgeous. It is, and it looks like a White Stripes album cover the whole way through. It looks like the 3rd volume of Unnamed Journal, just like red and black and white all the way through. It's beautiful.
I have some original. I think they're second printings, but I have some British second printings of the Elric series that I inherited from a British friend of ours who moved to Australia, and obviously he wasn't going to be taking his book collection with him. And I got all of that and his stainless steel rat stuff, and but a lot of his Moorcock, including the stuff with the God damn it, Well, it's neither here nor there. But he did a story in that anthology. He of course also did Good Omens, which was turned into a
Well,
fairly
him and Terry Pratchett wrote that
yes,
together.
That's what I know the name from is Good
yes,
Omens.
Yep.
worked on, which is very. I mean, I don't know how those two managed to work together so well that you read it and like this is very Terry Pratchett, but this is also very Neil Gaiman, and it's not jarring and very pleasant.
When he helped with the show too, which
Yeah.
so
I think I started to read like the first Good Omens novel, and something about it irritated me, and I put it away. And I watched a couple episodes of the series, and I was like, okay, this is fine.
Yes.
It's fine. But nothing jumped out at me to make me finish it.
And funnily enough, Neil Gaiman is actually lampooned in Preacher.
oh, that's right.
See, I like Preacher. I've always liked Preacher whenever
Okay.
I've read Preacher.
Did you ever read the episode where Cassidy is going over a little bit of his origin story, wherein he meets another vampire in New Orleans?
No.
And the vampire has this group of hanger-on goth posers called the Enfants des Slang, or how you say that in French. And like one of the characters that's got like a book of poetry is very clearly drawn to be Neil Gaiman. And I can't remember if he gets the book of poetry shoved down his throat or up his ass. It's Preacher. It could be either. And that was a little bit of fun, jabbing Garth Ennis was doing at his fellow Brit and Vertigo writer.
Yeah, because they're both working on the same label. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was just a little fun jabbing, not meant mean-spirited at all, because Neil Gaiman, as far as I can tell, does not take himself seriously at all. At all. He really does not. I've seen him dressed up as the Goblin King from Labyrinth. And it was hilarious.
I feel like that's taking yourself a little seriously.
So one film that they did based on his work was actually based on his first novel called Stardust, and Robert De Niro plays a great like minor part in this movie, but it's it was like the best performance I'd seen him give in like 20 years, like when I saw this movie. But yeah, that was a case where actually the film adaptation was better than the book Stardust, but that was like his actual first novel.
And he said
after
so.
Working in comics for however long.
My lovely wife is very big into the works of Neil Gaiman. She's got one book of his that I keep intending to read that I have not done so.
Oh, it's The Ocean Down the Lane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said I will get to it, my dear, when I'm back into the mode of reading fine literature again. Right now, I'm intaking my media visually, and I didn't have to say that way, but I did it any fucking way. There we go. Yeah, but I have to agree with you on the Stardust one. That movie is because I remember reading the book and I'm like, yeah, I mean, this is okay.
Yeah, I think the only thing you really get in the book is you have a clearer idea of who all the dead like ghost brothers are, and like how you get like more of their backstory. But beyond that, like the movie is actually better paced than the book.
And it has Mark Strong chewing the scenery. And
he's a good villain.
And Charlie Cox as Tristan, the future Daredevil, as the main character, and Claire Danes doing a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm.
My introduction.
Yeah, her and Charlie have like good chemistry.
They have very good chemistry. And Michelle Pfeiffer is wonderful in it.
Yep.
It's
a great film.
There she goes, going in a chariot drawn by goats. I'm like, yes, this is very Norse right here. I guess because it was harder to do CGI cats at the time. Who knows? Who knows? We get to see chariots drawn by goats soon in the new Thor movie. That's neither here nor there either.
It's neither here nor there.
Neither here nor there. Yeah, God, I hate you.
All right, so Neil Gaiman.
Yes. Hey, the tracks, we found them.
Going off the rails on a crazy train.
Na, 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 na,
Hey, how is
na, na,
Ozzy doing anyway? Wait, okay, fine, fucking no. Look. So
He's
That's
Neil
still
Gaiman.
about a
incredible.
British dude who we don't necessarily understand and tells us dark stories that are ineffable, okay?
I mean, there are some parallels. You're
There
not
are
wrong.
parallels.
But,
The
I feel
British,
like Ozzy and Alan Moore would hang out and have a wonderful time together.
I mean, I
Maybe, I don't know.
suppose neither of them would be able to understand the other. Ozzy, because he just is, he's not very, I mean, he doesn't enunciate worth a fucking damn. And Alan, because he talks so slow.
Right.
So I was drinking my tea the other day, Grant. It was an Earl Grey, quite fruity. The aroma was piquant, and I was reading. See exactly, that would be a conversation, right? And I was working with Lenny on an album, and I snorted a line of ants, and Why do you,
Now
all
this
right,
is
so
now this is the Motley Crue story. Where are we now? What's happening? Okay,
we
so
do not talk about Motley Crue.
So
no, you shouldn't,
characteristics of Gaiman's like style or whatever. It's definitely like very dark fantasy.
Yes,
It's there's sometimes like some horror elements.
yes.
Yeah, and then there's other times where it's just basically like pure fantasy, but that's essentially it.
And he will always pull from some element of folklore or literature if he can.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, he is actually pretty good about trying to tie it to folklore. So
And mythology,
yep.
and he also is incredibly clever without pointing out, hey, look how incredibly clever I am. Like, he shows, he doesn't tell on his cleverness.
Well, I appreciate him because he usually has an idea of the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story. And while he's I don't think that he always like knows exactly how it's going to go, but he has a clear idea of what the overall story is.
Yes.
And like he's very good at matching. I feel like a lot of his work is pretty well paced. It's a lot of his work is very readable.
Yes.
It's accessible, but he's good at painting sort of very vivid
So
picture.
when I say the term British children's story tone, do
Mhm.
you know what I'm talking about? I can give
Yeah.
you two examples. One would be C.S. Lewis,
Yeah.
the first Narnia book, and like the first Harry Potter book.
Yeah,
which
sure.
I will not necessarily endorse the works of a turf, but it is an example of a tone. When sometimes Neil Gaiman, when he
I lived
writes,
overseas and watched like British cartoons and read like British children's books and things like that. So like, yeah, I know the tone you're talking
and
about.
yeah, and Neil Gaiman will sometimes enact this tone. It especially came across when he was doing a mini series for Vertigo called part of me called The Children's Crusade, where he wrote a story about two ghost boy detectives who died in a British boarding school,
Interesting.
horrifically in terrible things that you can only imagine going on in man. From what I understand, British boarding schools are like a combination of like the pit from fucking Dark Knight Returns that Bane climbed out of,
Mhm.
and like Caligula, man. I mean, good God.
Yeah, I've
like-
heard some horror stories. Like I've also known other people that were just like I was really bored and busy all the time, and
Like it sounds like British boarding schools veer between boring, abusive, and prison.
But you were saying that Gaiman basically wrote a story where it was these two like
Two boy ghost detectives.
fascinating.
They're ghosts. They died in a British boarding school, and they're detectives.
Interesting.
And it was part of a mini series for DC called The Children's Crusade that ran throughout the verticals. I think it may have taken place in the Books of Magic, which I had forgotten
okay.
did right until now.
Right.
Which, if you take a look at the main character from Books of Magic and you take a look at Harry Potter,
I'd
one
forgotten
kind
about
of
that.
wonders where Rowling got her ideas from, because bespeckled boy wizard with owl,
Right. Yeah,
who's a
that is
chosen
yeah.
one.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. That is actually that did exist in books of magic well before, years
it did.
before.
And
Wow,
Timothy
I
Hunter,
forgotten
I
about
believe,
that.
and that was a pretty good miniseries where they introduced Timothy Hunter in the books of magic because that had Constantine in it and the Phantom Stranger and
Did
Mr.
Gaiman ever do
E.
Constantine or Hellblazer?
I don't know. That is a good
Constantine is
question. He could have.
part of Constantine is part of the whole Sandman
Virgo,
universe.
yes.
I think you understand.
Constantine, yeah, he is part of it. He showed
Yeah,
up.
he shows
He
up.
probably showed up in a couple issues of Sandman. I know he did. He did because he specifically asked Morpheus to help him out with a nightmare he'd been having for several years after he helped Morpheus recover the helm of dreams.
Oh shit, that's right. That was that story.
And because it was in the first initial first several issues of Sandman, where Sandman was recovering his artifacts of power
Right.
that he had put some of himself into, and which were taken from him. And there's going to be spoilers, you fuckers that start crying about that. Look, this shit came out in the 80s. You don't get to cry about shit that was published in the 80s just because a new miniseries is coming out of it. Call a fucking wambulance for your being butthurt, all right? I'm sorry.
Wait.
How do you
Hold
really
up.
feel?
Hold up. Are people complaining about spoilers?
People apparently do places.
I mean, with regard to our podcast, is what I'm asking.
Old published works, oh my god, the tears of utter suffering from you spoiled a 50-year-old published work that's or even better, you spoiled a piece of work that's in the public domain by this point because there's a new movie coming out of it. So somehow you spoiled, like, no, I didn't spoil it. Living in this culture spoiled it. I just went into the finer details, you pedantic cunt.
But what he's really trying to say is,
What I'm really trying to say. And by the way, I am not sexist. I use that insult interchangeably between genders. I don't care if you're male, female, or other. If you act like a cunt, I'm calling you a cunt. Ergo, a cunt.
you're saying it's a unisex term.
It is a unisex term.
Right. Okay.
I use it without malice or rancor in regards to gender. I do use it with malice and rancor, though. Anyway,
I mean, if we're gonna get into it, I mean, yes, I mean that particular term is an insult, but like, so is dick.
yes,
I
it
mean,
is.
if both kinds of genitalia in their Anglo-Saxon form can be turned into insults, then what's the problem? So,
Yep.
Coraline?
Interdimensional travel.
British-ish, whimsy-ish, Tim Burton-ish.
Extremely Tim Burton-ish. Extremely Tim Burton-ish.
Has Tim Burton and Neil Gaiman ever collaborated on anything? I feel they should have if they haven't.
The film was not directed by Tim Burton. It was directed by
it was just
Henry Selick?
Yeah.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
It's the guy that did Nightmare Before Christmas.
He's the guy who did Nightmare Before Christmas, which everyone thinks is a and also
Tim
James
Burton.
and the Giant Peach.
Yep.
Everyone thinks he's
oh god, what is the guy that wrote James and Giant?
So Coraline was actually based on Gaiman's like novella of the same name. Yeah. But yeah, adapted by Henry Selick.
Yeah.
Dahl is the guy that wrote James and the Giant Peach.
Henry Selick directed Monkey Bone. Did y'all ever see Monkey Bone?
Another Brendan Fraser classic.
Yeah, it's not the best, but yeah, I did see it.
Did anyone ever see Cool World? Because I feel that's where we're going with this.
I unfortunately also saw that movie.
I'm looking at the Graveyard Book right now. That is a thing that Neil Gaiman wrote.
Yep.
I know nothing about this.
I mean,
that's one I haven't read.
He is an interesting character. He has gone gray, I believe, at this point. I have a good friend that used to do a fanzine called The Oubliette in his youth. and he actually met. There's a picture of him and Neil Gaiman, and you wouldn't recognize my friend because he's so young in it. No facial hair, and actually hair on his head, and young, young, and he's actually thinking of getting back into publishing the Oubliette again. Um,
Cool.
And we have featured his wife's works
Yes.
on this podcast. This is the husband of the writer of the werewolf modern.
Oh, right. I remember that.
And her husband in high school / college used to publish a fanzine called the Oubliette, which I think is clever.
That's a great name for a fanzine. That's a
I
great
think
name
it's
for
very,
anything.
yes,
Perfectly honest.
very clever. And like I said, picture him and Neil Gaiman. He got to interview him. I don't know if that interview ever showed up in the Oubliette. I hope it did, and I hope he has back issues of it, and I hope he republishes that when he gets into doing a fanzine. Again, I mean, his wife already self-publishes. I talk to them a lot about that kind of thing because
cool cover art. That's what I remember.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and she did it too. I found out.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
She comes from a line of artists. Her mother is both a historian and a librarian, and paints these beautiful hand-painted doors all through Fairfield. Her work's all over the place, and her mother just does this gorgeous work. It's very much in the Pennsylvania Dutch style of flowers and vines.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a tangent, but it works because her husband met Neil Gaiman. So there you go. And is into publishing. And I always kind of wondered if Neil Gaiman published his own magazine, what would be it? He has a blog, which I guess is kind of the same.
Mm-hmm.
And he is pro people reading. He told LeVar Burton that he could use any of his stuff for reading Rainbow, royalty free, license. Yeah, go ahead, man, use it. Use my stuff.
Cool.
He is into literature as art. He is into comic books as art. He is into storytelling as art. He is into the oral tradition as art. And I think it's important to promote these things. And I think I'm a fan of his work, but I'm a fan of his stuff getting more global recognition because I hope it's going to drive people back to, experiencing literature in some format, be it audiobooks or the written word or whatever, because there's nothing more powerful than the theater of the mind.
Well, and stories bring people, stories bring people together. That it's a shared context.
All cultures tell stories. They don't necessarily tell the same stories, but they all tell stories.
That's true.
Stories are how we got here. Stories of how we got here. Stories are how we express the great unknowns and questions. Stories as our reaching into the darkness and asking, are we alone?
Yes.
Stories are our experience. There are tales. There are histories. There are histories that only existed in our head. There are histories that never were but should have been.
I like that idea.
Stories are what give us meaning, I believe. Do animals have stories? I almost guarantee whales do in their song. Do chimpanzees have stories? Perhaps. Scientists have determined some animals have very complex languages. I can't remember what species specifically. Some birds have complex songs that are clearly telling more than mere communication of food, let's fuck, and hey, look, there's a nest, or warning.
Right.
Stories may be that great thing that lets us transcend life in terms of interconnecting with other forms of life. If there is life in the universe, perhaps they have stories too, and that's how we will connect with them, because they will have no other means of expressing stories, of communicating, except maybe in stories. And yes, science fiction has touched on that, even an episode of Star Trek, though that was more about metaphor, but stories. What is metaphor but a tiny 1 to 2 sentence story? Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
planned so many episodes tonight. We've done a great
And
job.
we've done
a great job at everything except talking about Neil Gaiman, and that's
we
You're
have
right.
done an excellent
We really
job.
fell down on the job on that one, I think.
Look, no. Neil Gaiman. All right. No, let me help us get back on track and vindicate our bullshit.
Okay.
And that is, Neil Gaiman is such the experience that one cannot properly express the breadth and tenor of his work without reading it. Neil Gaiman must be read, either read to you via audiobook or read yourself to be able to get it, Mr. Button. To quote,
wow.
David Lopan, David Hong,
Star on the Walk of Fame.
I could wax poetic about Neil Gaiman all goddamn day, and you would still be unable, and his works, and still be unable to give you the flavor and breadth of it that you can only experience from how he engages your mind's eye theater and how he engages your imagination, the worlds that he takes you to that are fantastical and yet gritty and real, but not necessarily depressing. Sometimes, because real life can be depressing, but not fatalistic and grim.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not like
Okay.
Graham. Yeah.
It is not fatalistic and grim. It is sometimes because bad things happen in life.
Oh, sure.
Sure.
And his stories, no matter how fantastic, are in the real. In that, yes, people do react like this. Yes, people do behave like this. Yes, people think like this. People have foibles, especially heroes.
I do think that he's good at characterization
Yes.
in the same way that Stephen King is, wherein you'll have like something completely crazy happen, but the characters that may not be used to this sort of thing happening, like react in a realistic way. Like you see it, and it's like your suspension of disbelief is never broken. You're like, no, that's how that's totally believable that this insane thing would happen and this person would behave this way in response to it.
Yes.
So I would say that's definitely a strength. He's got some interesting ideas in a fairly idiosyncratic style. So I do feel like he's a good jumping in point for a lot of fantasy, especially like some of the darker stuff or the more, the heavier stuff.
He can do science fiction. None of his science fiction comes to mind at the moment, but he can do it.
Mm-hmm. He wrote that episode of Doctor Who, which was actually
you're right.
Fantastic.
Doctor Who, I would not call science fiction, dude.
It's science fantasy.
I call it space fantasy with constantly I mean, don't get me wrong. I like Doctor Who because I don't feel like having Whovians come at me in the comments because your wibbly wobbly, timey wimey masturbatory fantasies and all, but
anyone who's a fan of Doctor Who deserves it.
Those are harsh words, man. But yeah, no, Neil Gaiman. I don't ever feel that I could ever do him any sort of justice. He's quirky, yes, but his shit's deep. But he's not like deep in that. Look how clever I am. It's like I was saying.
More layers to it, and as you continue to read it, it keeps going and unfolding and becomes.
And even his stuff that's not the greatest is still rereadable.
Okay, yeah,
it's still rereadable. Like it's like I can consequently say I don't think he's ever produced trash. He may have produced a couple unpolished works. But nothing that if I was on a desert island, I would use the book to wipe my ass with.
Fair.
I cannot say this about many authors' works. And mind you, I'm anti-book destruction for the most part, except in emergencies, and my butt needs wiping. I feel that all books have value, if for nothing else, to learn what not to do.
Right.
That's fair.
Books are what a person. A book is a person's story. And even if I don't like the story or the person and disagree with them vehemently, they still wrote out their story, and maybe you can learn something from it, especially if they're a horrible cunt. And
So
I
you're
would say
saying that you have a copy of Mein Kampf somewhere, Kieran.
I am not saying that. I am saying I should own the works of a horrible cunt. And you don't get much more horrible of a cunt than Hitler. I mean,
True.
he's the horriblest cunt that ever did live.
It was pretty
I
awful.
felt like you were leading up to something. I'm sorry.
I was going to lead up to Hitler was a horrible cunt, yeah, but
I'm glad we had this talk. Yeah, no.
I feel that I didn't need to say that, much like I don't need to say that water is wet and trees are wood.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But I do believe one has to say that there is, regardless of how badly written and how fucking false the logic is, that there is some lesson. I'm not going to say value because that's a qualitative statement, and I'm not willing to apply a qualitative statement to Mein Kampf. But there is a lesson to be learned.
Like what not to do, what not to think.
What not to write.
Yeah.
Like there is educational value, at least in that, and in all books. And part of my soul just died saying that, but the truth hurts sometimes.
It do.
A lot. Often. You know, I found out that my wife was actually a big old Transformers fan and loves the original animated movie, and I knew her for a good 20-some-odd years and didn't know that fact.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Never came up. I said, wait, you like the Transformers? She'll love it. I said, well, fuck, I've got the original animated movie on DVD. Let's watch that for a date night.
Oh,
She finds... She did one of the great statements in the house, don't get Garen started on Transformers.
You're saying that she's more than meets the eye.
I was waiting.
Yes.
I think we ought to just say Yahtzee and call it a night, guys.
Come on!
I feel we can say no more about Neil Gaiman. I'm sorry, Neil. I tried. I had a lot of shit I wanted to say about your crazy hot wife.
Wait, who's Neil Gaiman married to? Is that relevant?
Huh?
Who's he married to?
I mean, he's married to Amanda Palmer of the Dresden Dolls. Amanda Palmer.
Oh, right, you mentioned that.
Is from Boston, and she is a wacky alt music woman who plays the ukulele and has very strange tattooed eyebrows and scroll work, and has opinions, and some of them I agree with, and some of them I don't. And has occasionally decided that, fuck it, I'm taking my top off on stage. Because titties, why not?
Why not, indeed?
As a political statement. And some people think she's wonderful. Some people think she's horrible. I think she's an artist who expresses herself in the most genuine to her way. And I enjoy some of her work.
Okay.
And I feel that her work in general has value. And, you know, she has brought me entertainment. And clearly Neil sees something in her. I mean, besides his dick. And,
wow.
macaque. I'm sorry, Neil. I just pictured you saying that in your voice, too, that you used for... Apologies to Neil Gaiman, man. I'm very, very sorry. I really am a fan, but I am a hopelessly crude Yank and an American, and I try to reach for the heights of the angel, but oftentimes descends into the realms of the ape.
You're colonializing yourself, Kieran. You're colonializing
I am
yourself.
a little more than a philosophical bonobo.
I'm looking at a picture of them right now from like 2011, the two of them together, and they look like they go together. In fact, they appear to be mirroring each other.
They do. They briefly had a little bit of trouble during COVID, but I've heard that they have reconciled. They separated, but they didn't divorce, and that they have reconciled since then. And I hope that's true, Neil. I hope you and Amanda have worked it out, because you guys are a marvelously entertaining couple. I really do. I know you'll never hear this, Mr. Gaiman, but bully for you guys. I hope you continue to work it out. Too many couples don't, and I feel it's a sad thing.
I mean, as long as one of them doesn't end up suing the other one for defamation in open court.
Oh, Jesus, don't get me started on that.
Then you can put all your head, right?
Yeah, man, let's put that. I think that is a good ending note for this episode.
Right,
I don't mind getting topical. I don't want to get into that.
All right, fair enough. Let us do the thing that we must do. We're at the 2-hour mark, and
yes,
some things are going to have to be removed in post, but that's okay. I'll take care of it.
That's typical. Typically, it's me.
There's going to be more that has to end up cut this time than most of the time.
Yeah,
please leave in the my cack joke. That was divinely inspired.
I'll see what I can do. I did have to leave the room briefly because my cat was running around the house with a paper bag tied around its head.
This has been Shallow and Pedantic.
Yes,
brought to you by the letter of B, the number 9, and the phrase "I lied."
Wow.
This is Kieran.
My name's Andrew, I think.
And I'm Mike. For now.
Thank you for listening to our insanity.